That's probably about 200 oysters right there.
Hey, today we're at the Barnegat Oyster Collective, and we're gonna see how oysters are harvested.
We're going through a row here. The ecological value of oyster farms is about the same as coral reefs. So they come here to hang out.
What type of bird is that?
That's a tern.
They're turning it up.
Yeah.
Hey Matt, so we gonna harvest some oysters today?
Nah, can't do it on Sundays.
It's illegal?
Yeah, New Jersey, only state in the country.
Illegal in New Jersey, you say? I could fix that. How hard could it be? Welcome back to Meet Clint. I'm your host, Clint Calabrese. Today, we're going to tell the story of a bill that I co-sponsored, bill number A3847. It's good for the environment and good for business too. It's bipartisan and pro-oyster. So, how complicated could it be? Very complicated. Shellfish regulations are very, very complicated, like extremely complicated. It all began in the summer of 2021. I was a sophomore legislator back then with a hit web series. Handsome, but not like in your face with it. I was on the Agriculture Committee, and we received an invitation to tour New Jersey's oyster farms. I couldn't attend because I was doing something very responsible and important, but my Chief of Staff, Catherine Suarez, went on this boat trip. A boat trip that would change the course of New Jersey history.
We were out on boats in the middle of Barnegat Bay checking out the leased aquaculture area.
And so what you see here, this is leased land, so he pays a lease fee to have the right to farm here.
10 years ago, I was going out by myself, growing oysters, landing them, and then getting in my truck and driving them around to restaurants. So we saw this as an opportunity to provide support for the industry and take care of those things for the growers so that they can focus on what they want to do, which is growing oysters.
The farmers were discussing the fact that we are the only state in the country in which they are unable to harvest on Sundays.
We're always competing with uncooperative tides, poor weather, and we need that Sunday sometimes.
So when that came up, I actually called the assemblyman from the boat, telling him the problem and asking him if he was interested in getting involved to try to make a solution. And he said, absolutely, let's help them out. I'm like, this is great, we're gonna be able to help them, help New Jersey, help the restaurants, just by lifting this Sunday blue law.
The maintenance of leases limited to moving and planting shall be permitted on Sunday.
Yeah, you're allowed to work on Sunday. You're just not allowed
that's what
to
you were
harvest.
saying.
So that was 2 years ago almost. And what seemed like a very simple problem with a very simple solution, of course. Never is.
Once you file a bill, a lot of different stakeholders get involved, and they all want one thing: amendments.
There have been arguments about should it be shellfish, should it be aquaculture, which is actually farmed. Aquaculture is not wild. There is no overfishing impact.
Basically, the wild climbers thought the bill was too narrow, so we changed aquaculture to shellfish. But then the DEP raised concerns about overfishing, so we changed it back to aquaculture and added new reporting requirements.
DEP wanted a report on harvesting. Should it be monthly reporting? What should be involved in the reporting?
If it's an aquaculture bill dealing with aquacultured oysters, why are we including the harvest of wild harvest clams and putting additional reporting in it?
Luckily, I find all of this fascinating. I think that's actually fundamental in doing this job, because if not, I think you'll probably go crazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
In a minute, we're going to take you inside the committee meeting, where our amended bill came up for a vote. But first, Matt has a shellfish law palate cleanser, where we're just going to talk about shucking and eating New Jersey oysters with a local expert.
I'm at Sweet Amalia Market and Kitchen with Lisa Calvo, and we're going to try some Jersey oysters.
Yeah, so these are Sweet Amalia oysters, harvested fresh yesterday. I've been farming oysters for about 10 years, and the restaurant is relatively new. It developed during the pandemic as an opportunity to sell our oysters when the restaurants that we were selling to closed. They're grown in the southern Delaware Bay. That's a moderately salty area. Kind of have a sweet yet a little bit of briny flavor. So oysters are really cool because they take on their flavor from the place they're grown. So if you were trying oysters from Barnegat Bay, they'd be a little bit brinier, more salt. When you shuck an oyster, right, there's a flat shell and then there's this more cupped shell. And if you hold the flat shell up, you know, there's the muscle that holds the shells together is at about 2 o'clock. So the first thing I do is I pop it open at the hinge, and then from there we're just gonna slide the knife around and cut the meat from the shell. Cut it off the shell there. And then you have to remember to cut the muscle underneath. There you go.
Wow. It's so fresh.
Yeah.
You can really
They're
taste
really
it.
crisp.
I think that's one of the really cool things about this Jersey oyster industry, right? Is that we're actually getting oysters that are a day away from the restaurant.
Right. Well, I guess we have about 30 farms in New Jersey now. It's just, I think New Jersey has some of the best oysters out there.
New Jersey oysters are the best. And that's probably the only thing I could say about them that won't make someone mad at me. The bill was dropped last session, and then it's reintroduced in May of 2022. It's been amended, reported out of the Ag Committee, and then the big day arrives, June 15th, 2023.
Thank you for attending. We're here today for the meeting of the Assembly Environment and Solid Waste Committee.
Will it be released from the Assembly Environment Committee to the General Assembly? Not without a few objections.
For a long time, we have been able to suppress the recreational industry from having access to our wild resources on Sunday. This bill goes through, it will open the door for a recreational influx.
So there's two ways of looking at this. If his concern is overfishing, well, that's not going to be a problem because the bill is restricted to permitted aquaculture.
So everything that we harvest, we planted. It's not considered a natural resource.
Oyster farming is good for the water, and their use of the seabed is limited by a permitting process. It's not like you can just stop at a bait and tackle shop on your way down the shore and pick up a permit to start an oyster farm. Now, the other side of this is that what Mr. Parsons and others might be referring to as recreational are part-time oyster farmers.
It is still not super clear to me why they need to have Sunday harvest. It might be easier for them if they're only doing it on weekends. And then we have a different issue. Then we have what I would console as a hobbyist versus somebody that's making their living doing this.
This is one area where we may just respectfully disagree. Even as a part-timer, oyster farming is a very labor-intensive process with a complex permitting system. And a lot of full-time oyster farmers we spoke with started out part-time.
In a lot of ways, the reason for this bill sort of echoes my career trajectory at this point. When I started oyster farming, I was a weekend oyster farmer. I was a school teacher and only had certain times that I was able to go out.
A Sunday harvest would make it easier for new farmers to break into the industry. And as long as they're properly permitted, I think that's good for the state. Here's another objection.
And we operate our business in this public trust, and others recreate within this area. So with that in mind, the allowance of Sunday shellfishing will put us in a much more interaction with that public. If we lose the public trust in this area, we're going to lose our businesses.
I don't have personal experience on an oyster boat, but the farmers I've spoken to don't believe that a Sunday harvest is going to hurt their relationship with the public.
As a shellfish farmer, we are working out in our shared bays, and that's a privilege. We go through a very significant permitting process that enables some balance of multiple uses in the space. And we're out there on Sundays anyway, whether we're harvesting or not.
So these next two issues are trickier. Get your melted butter and mignonette. You're about to learn more than you ever wanted to know about shellfish law.
There's a question whether or not the DEP has sufficient enforcement for 7 days a week. So if for some reason the Department of Health came in and said, you guys don't have enough enforcement to enforce or oversee your industry, then they can basically shut down the industry from interstate commerce.
This is a valid concern, but the DEP has assured us they can manage monitoring a Sunday harvest. Every other state has found a way to make this work, and I think we can too. Now, this final objection is the trickiest of all. This is your oyster law PhD. A lot of industry voices have suggested an alternative legislative fix to the problem.
Our existing Shellfish Council, myself, and the bulk of the shellfish industry believe the only amendment to Sunday harvest is in Title 50. We changed the word oysters to shellfish.
So what's he talking about? It turns out that in Title 50, Chapter 2, Section 11, there already exists a provision that says the department, in consultation with the council, yada yada yada, may adopt rules and regulations for the harvest of oysters on Sunday. What it means is this. The Shellfish Council and the DEP have already had the power for many years to allow Sunday harvests for oysters, but not for clams. And instead of changing the law to allow for Sunday aquaculture harvest statewide, they want us to give them the power to do it for clammers as well, and then handle it through the Shellfish Council on a regional basis.
The Shell Fisheries Council raised an issue that they have regulatory ability to make this change. They could do it by regulations, we could do it by statute. So they want to be able to do it. We understand that. We totally understand their interest in, being at the table, weighing in, giving their opinion and their recommendations. But there have also been concerns raised that the aquaculture farmers have brought this issue to the Shell Fisheries Council and maybe feel like things weren't really moving to address their needs at the time.
In the end, it's all about the process.
A Sunday harvest seems like a simple thing, but there's lots of rules that applies to all of these activities. The concern is that a lot of these concepts that suddenly come to legislators might not be the best idea, and it might be better to have those that understand the whole process work on it a little bit more before we just change the law.
Ouch, Scott. No, but seriously, he has a fair point. I'm not an expert on shellfish. I'm a legislator. I'm here to mediate between the different stakeholders who are all experts in their field, and to try to find solutions that are in the public interest. The Shellfish Councils have done amazing work managing our natural resources, and they help set the stage for the comeback of the New Jersey oyster. Is it possible we could have found a way to fix this through the Shellfish Council? Probably. But as you've seen, it takes so much time and effort to get anything across the finish line in government that if you wait for perfection, I think you run the risk of never doing anything at all. Okay, so that's my speech. How did we do in committee?
Carrie Ann, take the roll on the motion.
Assemblyman Schreckenberger?
I think the bill is very close. It needs some work, and I think it can be attained, but not quite there, so no.
Assemblywoman McCarthy-Patrick?
I'm going to have to say it.
Assemblyman Guardian?
It's a no.
Assemblywoman Hayter?
Yes.
Assemblyman McKeon has left his votes in the affirmative. Assemblyman Stanley?
Yes.
Chairman Kennedy?
Yes.
The bill is released.
We got it released from committee. Then it passed the floor vote in the Assembly. And on concurrence, passed the floor vote in the Senate. Now it's awaiting the governor's signature. Please, sir, sign this bill. So what's the moral of the story? 1. Oysters are complicated. 2. I couldn't have done this without Catherine Suarez.
If you didn't have this process, then all these different stakeholders that will be impacted one way or another would not have a say, would not be able to have their issues weighed in making the final language of legislation that affects everybody in the state of New Jersey.
Even something that seems as non-controversial as overturning an obscure blue law about oysters is actually filled with complexities that need to be ironed out. And the details aren't just minor frustrations. The details are the job. Special thanks to Matt Gregg and the Barnegat Oyster Collective, to Scott Mackey of MBI Gluckshaw, and to Lisa Calvo of Sweet Amalia's Marketing Kitchen. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and make sure you try a fresh New Jersey oyster. It was nice to meet you.